This is going to be an exciting conversation. It's a conversation with Karen Ball. Karen Ball is a senior fellow at Prosci, and she's also the author of this book, ADKAR Advantage. This book brings her 40 years of change management experience. And the interesting thing again about this book is it doesn't only carry Karen's voice, it also carries 54 other storytellers' voices. 36 of them are talking about business application of ADKAR, ranging in scale from a few hundreds to very many thousands. And probably the beautiful part about this book is it honors and extends the original 2000 book by Jeff Hiat, the founder of Prosci. Karen, big welcome to you and congratulations on publishing your first book and having it read globally by change leaders.
Thank you, Krish. It's really a pleasure to be here. And, I've been working on the book for some time, so it's just great to see it come to fruition and see all the pictures and responses and places in all the world the book is being reviewed and read and applied. So I'm just thrilled to be here.
Thanks so much, Karen, for making the time. We had a few questions in our heads as we read through the book, and those are the ones I'm calling out now. But treat every question as a conversation starter, if you would like. The first thing I want to call out is, speaking from India, working with change management projects in very many parts of the subcontinent, it is cross-cultural. ADKAR is very much cross-cultural. The methodology is very much cross-cultural. It's ADKAR truth number 3, right? So absolutely, right? But I'm just calling it out because I see on LinkedIn lots of commentary speaking about, does it work here? Does it work there? It definitely works here. That said, I'm curious, as you heard the very many storytellers talk about the changes and how they practiced it in different countries, what, if anything, surprised you?
Wow, great question. Yeah, the process was really interesting, Krish. As a representative of Prosci, it's important that we get the message out about what the ADKAR model is and how it works and how it was created. There was so much research and, hundreds of organizations and thousands of people contributed to creating the ADKAR model from the perspective of describing the challenge of managing change. And of course, Jeff Hiat unlocked that through the concept that change is individual first before it's organizational. And I think that comes to life, right? We can say those words and intellectually we understand the concept, the change is individual. But I was really focused on gathering the input and insights and guidance from, as you said, the 54 ADKAR storytellers that are represented in the book. And I needed and wanted that to be global, and I needed and wanted that for the reader to be able to see that this isn't just US-centric. It's not just a particular part of organizations or certain sizes or types. But I think the one thing that surprised me most was the consistency, right? There was so much consistency in terms of the unlock, right? The ability to actually unlock everything from, as you said, the ADKAR storytellers range from one person in a personal application. There's a story about Grant who learns to swim as an adult, and he took himself through that learning process through the lens of ADKAR, all the way up to, as you said, hundreds, even thousands, multiple thousands of people, one healthcare organization with over 50,000 people going through a really massive digital transformation. And I think that the consistencies in that really unlocking the individual change process, that it is at the person level, each person, every person who goes through change, and then we scale the model and we bring it to life through the methodology. So consistency was, actually one of the most surprising things, right? That there wasn't a way to pull that thread by guiding people to that answer. They provided it by themselves.
And I can imagine the red thread forming, and there is a beauty about the fact that things click together again and again and again and again, right? It does work beautifully. I agree with that. One more question, since you mentioned Jeff. Jeff's book's origin story obviously speaks about his searching for an answer to that question, right? Why do some changes fail while others succeed? And obviously this book, you have also referenced that. And then you have cited research to point out that said, change management can be a key indicator and a contributor to success, right? You get a 7x benefit. With that said, in your mind, why do you think change management is still not integral to very many enterprises?
That's a wondering, right? We, for practitioners, right? For people who, like myself and yourself and your organization, who have been involved in this space for so long, it's difficult to imagine that organizations still haven't found change management. And so when I think about how did I find change management, I was working in an information technology capacity for quite many years, a couple of decades, and I was leading the implementation side of our technology business. And the adoption story just kept coming back as the biggest impediment to success, right? If people don't engage, adopt, and use the technology solutions we were implementing, then there's no point to developing them anyway.
Right.
So I think it's creating a language and context. ADKAR and the Prosci methodology create language for the problem that everyone is experiencing, but just may not know that there's a methodology and process to address it. And it's a discovery process. It also could just be based on how they, implement change within their organizations. For organizations that are very project-centric, project leaders also think about the people side of change. They just may not have all of the guidance and insights that they need to be truly successful. And change management fills that gap. It comes alongside the project management discipline to address the people side of the change. So I think in many ways, it's just they haven't come to the point where they've been searching out the answer, and to be able to pull all these concepts in and put it into application in their own business processes. Who's going to own this capability? Who's going to sponsor bringing the capability into the organization? So even though we can do it project by project, the true benefits come when an organization commits to building a change capability.
I wholeheartedly agree with you, Karen. My own journey into the change management world was when, as a leader, I had a realization that none of my KPIs measure my change success that we call out today. More important, none of them measure my change success on my predecessor's change. So if you don't have that kind of an R in the organization, something that makes sure that a change sticks and someone is responsible for having all the changes, the history of changes in the organization stick. Every leader is responsible for that history as they walk into a particular role. I feel that pull might still be a few steps away. Does that make sense?
It does. And, that's one of the things that we see is many leaders are good at initiating change, but not necessarily at closing change. And the closeout process needs to examine benefits realization. Did we achieve what we set out to do at the beginning? And what we know on the people side of change is that if you don't get everybody adopting and embracing and coming alongside the change, benefits realization is always at risk. So I think it brings to the forefront that a lot of organizations around the world, big and small, are just not good at figuring out how to close into benefits realization. And that there is a method and a process to do that. And, you mentioned Jeff Hiat. I was able to engage with Jeff through the book writing process. And it just brought me back to some of the things that he felt was so important in all of this work is that ADKAR gives purpose to change management activities, right? These are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. So it allows us to actually measure if we're making that transition, right? If we're going from our current state to our future state by supporting and equipping everybody who's impacted through their ADKAR journeys. I mean, that's one of the things. But it's also a way to say, did we measure success at the individual level? And can we then assess our success at the project and organization level? So it really creates a nice framework for looking at the process of and the measurement of benefits realization.
Completely agreed. I guess that's also a risk that practitioners are going to look at something and say, duh, and the rest of the world is still needing us to translate it to simpler language. And I think, again, in your book, the part where you speak about the role of a practitioner in terms of building credibility, building capability, in order to be able to do that, in order to be able to help people understand, as well as those, again, lovely examples. I remember that one example, again, with, I think, the same healthcare example with 50,000 people, where it says, we don't actually have to tell them we are using ADKAR to help them and prepare them and equip them and support them through the change. We can use the ADKAR lens while they're going through the journey, right? So I think those are, it's again back to us as practitioners to help the organization see the value.
Yeah, and there's a couple of stories that really highlight that. That ADKAR doesn't have to be common language, but it can be common guidance, right? The way that we engage with people, how we craft our messages, who is sending those messages, when we check in with people to see how they're doing, what we ask them when we check in with them, what we do with our people leaders and our executive leaders who are sponsoring changes, just giving them the mindset of looking at their individuals in their organization through the lens of ADKAR and the outcomes and activities through the lens of ADKAR. So it really is a fascinating exercise when you think about the mental opportunity to frame things. And you know, we talk about it being a powerful yet simple model, right? The elements of ADKAR are just 5 words. But when you unpack each one of those and you put them into the context of large-scaled change, and you see the power and benefit of that simple model, that's what makes it stick. And I've heard people say, well, gosh, it's 30 years old at this point. You know, haven't we come up with something better? And the answer is no, because change is change and people are people, right? We all have a shared human experience when we go through change. We need to know why it's happening and how it's going to impact me and how are you going to help me through the change process and how do I capture the information that I need to be successful and build my proficiency and then make sure that the mechanisms and supporting structures reinforce the new behaviors and the new mindsets or beliefs or whatever is encompassed in the change. So yeah, it doesn't have to be called out. It can just be the mental model that we hold when we think about those activities and the outcomes and then the measurement and the sustainment of change. So it really is quite remarkable how consistent it is many years in, and it's growing in use because it works. I mean, it really does work.
Completely agreed. Incidentally, when I do that, I call it stealth change management, just go undercover.
Yeah, I've always called it sneaky change management, right?
There you go.
Stealth or sneaky, right? You're doing the work. And again, not everybody needs to, if you're a change practitioner, not everyone needs to see your toolkit, right? When I hire somebody to come in and do a construction project in my home, I don't go out in the truck and look to see what tools the plumber is going to use or the craftsman is going to have to build my new cabinets, right? But they're going to take me through the process because as a craftsman, as a practitioner, they know the tools and they know the process and they know the outcomes, and change practitioners are no different.
Absolutely. On the subject of practitioners, Karen, I have a question which is probably, it's coming from what I know of what happens in Indian companies, but I'm sure you've seen this in other places too. The scale of change tends to be large, as well as most domains and industries that companies work in tend to have an organizational design that is deliberately siloed. Right? And in which case, most sponsor coalitions tend to be fragmented. Do you have any advice on what we can do to help such sponsors, such leaders get onboarded, get equipped?
Yeah, it is interesting that the dynamics of org design have impact on, change management and practitioners, just like all the disciplines, right? So if you're in any of the human resources or functional areas of the organizations that are people-centric, you're going to have the same challenges. But I think it's important that you build your strategy around who the key influencers are. And they may not just be the ones at the top of the organization. You may have key influencers within specific areas of the business that you really want to attach to and really help them be successful. And you'll grow your own influence and impact by helping other people grow theirs. And that's a really interesting, capability that we have in this space is change practitioners work with and through others. So we have to be really aware, right, emotionally intelligent ourselves about what our role is, but also aware of who we can attach to or what change initiatives can we use as model projects, because success breeds success. So one of the things that I tell people, and I'm working on a community of practice presentation related to the book. And, the three things that I want change practitioners know is you need to test the content yourself. You need to know that this works, right? You can't just read the words and intellectually go, yeah, that makes sense, right? Just because it's common sense doesn't mean it's common practice. But you've got to really believe yourself that the ADKAR model and what it allows us to unpack and do, the integration with methodology, the integration with project management, all of those aspects, you need to prove it for yourself. Then you need to create and tell your own stories. So I encourage people to, that's one of the reasons I incorporated so many stories in the book, is to bring the concepts to life. And, there was a very simple set of questions that I put out to gather those stories. And they came in from all over the world with enthusiastic responses about people wanting to share. And I think, though, that within an organization, as you're looking at breaking down those silos or really effectively working in large scale, is you've got to create your own stories. It's like creating your own lore, right? How you can define, remember that one project and how it didn't go very well? What is it that we didn't do that we should have done? Versus, remember that other project that went really well? What did we do differently? And if you can start isolating those, again, success breeds success, and people will gravitate to the people who can help them be successful. So that really does require that change practitioners get really brave and step into that impact role that they can have in the organization. And, that doesn't happen overnight, just like building change capability, right? It would be ideal if every major organization had on their strategic initiative an important initiative to grow change capability. Would that be lovely, right? To be able to do that. But what's interesting is if you do look at the change portfolio of large organizations, they have lots of things they see being different or better to accomplish their organizational goals and objectives. And if they just wrapped change capability around them, all of them would be more successful. So I think it's one of those things we just have to continue to tell the stories. We've got to make those stories be our own, and we've got to continue to push on the value that this discipline brings to overall organization success.
Makes perfect sense, Karen. And on that theme, I remember your conversation with Michelle where you were describing when you saw Phil Eastman present the first time and you were enraptured and he said, hey, I want to be there. I remember that conversation. I'm though curious, in your career, what was the moment where you said, hey, this works and I can do it? Was there a moment where everything clicked in and he said, damn it, that's what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's interesting, right? I've had a lot of opportunity to do some reflection as I was going back through the book process. And, one of the things that I wanted to come across in the book is, this work is hard. Anytime you're working with people and you're working in organizations and you're navigating the complexities of organization cultures and power structures, it's difficult work. And at the same time, it is the most rewarding work I have ever done in my career. I've always called myself an end user advocate. And I didn't really know what that meant until I was introduced to ADKAR and the change management discipline. But I always knew that I cared about the people who are being asked to do things differently in their organizations as a result of, their commitment to work in an organization, right? Every organization needs to grow and expand and get better and improve and look for opportunities to get better. But I knew when I found out that my label that I gave myself as an end user advocate had a discipline, right? The whole discipline of change management and getting introduced to the world of Prosci and all the opportunities that I had through the learning. But it was in the actual application where you can see and feel the process unburdening people and giving them words to describe how they're feeling and giving them a path and a way to see themselves on the other side of successful change, to see themselves being leaders in the process, not just recipients of the changes that their organizations are implementing. So I think, Chris, for me, it was a natural inclination for me to care deeply about the people that I was working with, and then to be able to unlock that and to put all of the processes in place. It just feels like a gift. And it was really truly that transition shift for me in my career to go from leading a change management practice in an IT firm to helping to build the solutions that Prosci offers, and to, again, I think for me, career-wise, it's kind of a capstone to be able to pull all that together in the ADKAR book. And I'm both honored and excited, and yes, I was nervous to carry that responsibility, but I'm glad to see that it's being accepted. And it was really about me channeling the voices of others, the work that's been done, the contribution that the content offers, and to give people an opportunity to see themselves in the same role that I was in, to care about people and to see a path through.
And it does come through. It does come through. I love the fact that the book has the perfect balance between empathizing with the humanity of people undergoing change, while focusing on the organization need for getting something constructive done through the change, from the change. The whole premise of doing change with people rather than to people it does feel good.
Yeah,
it's chicken soup for the change practitioner soul. Sorry.
Absolutely, and if you think about it in the chapter about the change practitioners, there's a couple of tables in there that describe mindset shifts, and that body of work. There's so many people who contributed to the body of work that's contained in the book. Of course, Jeff Hiat being the founder and the one who ignited an interest in discovering why some changes fail and others succeed, and that organizational change is a result of successful individual change. And of course, Tim Creasy and all of the work that he has done over the many years to help push the thinking and the models forward. And then Lisa Kempton and Andrew Horlick, who are on the product team developing new learning products. They're the ones that have crafted this concept of the before and after and those mindset shifts. And I think they're really one of the most powerful couple of pages in the whole book if you're looking at this through the lens of a change practitioner.
I completely agree with that. Karen, though, when you mentioned end user, there's a couple of other questions that popped into my head. One was, I love the way in the book we speak about not just changes where there is a clear what's in it for me or what's in it for us. We also point out that sometimes there isn't going to be a what's in it for me, and perhaps you need to go big and see where you can help the employees see the value of the change. I was curious, and especially because we have a background in technology projects, there are some projects where the solution design is imperfect. It's not ready. It's untimely. It's poorly formed, or the organization intends it to be incrementally improved, right? In those cases, there's a lot of constructive resistance, right? There's a lot of constructive concern. And is there Is there a thought you have around what a change leader can do in those circumstances to bring people along?
Right. Yeah, if we waited till everything was perfect, we wouldn't do anything, right? I mean, there are technical solutions that come in progression, right? The Agile methodology has taught us about incremental change and the release structure of getting from point A to point B through a series of steps, right? Going through that release process. It's interesting that when you empower people with mindset and tool set in the space of leveraging ADKAR, the ADKAR model, and the process of change, it gives voice to things. And I think giving people voice and an opportunity to share. I had a project that I was implementing when I was leading a change management practice with an organization that was, many organizations go through mergers and acquisitions. This particular organization was going through a full separation and divestiture. And through that process, there were people being asked to move to very different parts of the country, to pick up very different roles in their work if they were going to be able to stay with the change. And we actually, as a leadership team, I was coaching and advising even up to the CEO level of that organization. And so, we just have to be very honest and open and authentic about the impact of this change. There's no way that you can introduce this and not immediately have people be concerned about how it's going to impact them. So lead with that. Lead with your messaging to say, we know that you're going to be impacted. Help us help you. And when people choose not to continue on or didn't see a future for themselves in this change, help them find their next path. So they actually set up resources to help guide people through resume creation and job search services as part of their employment, which, you think that seems odd, but it was absolutely the right way to treat people through that change process. So I think it gives people the voice, again, in the incremental changes. Hearing people, feedback is a gift, right? When we're getting the feedback that the technical side of the change is missing the mark or is incomplete or is not quite right for the opportunity that's being pursued, we need to have a voice for that as well, because that's amazing feedback to the technical side of the teams, right? The people who are designing, developing, and delivering the solutions. So it just really points to the need to have that, the language, and give people a voice and listen to what people are saying, because if they are feeling like they're in a safe environment to give feedback, things go so much better, right? The solution will be better, the process will be better. And that may be hard for some cultures if they're more of a control and command kind of structure. So one of the examples that was in the book was an organization in Japan. And of course, Japan, has a very specific culture, as we know most entities and organizations do. But they created a whole feedback mechanism as a grassroots effort. So the people impacted by the change set up a technical solution to be able to share with each other. And so the project teams were able to monitor what kinds of questions people had and the feedback they were giving, and in a non-confrontational way, be able to explore those and expand on them. So it was really fascinating to see, it is important to look at our own cultures and our own structures to be able to take the best next action. So it's just, again, it just gives voice to this process, and, it's universal. It's something that every single one of us goes through.
Thanks, Karen. Makes perfect sense. And in fact, as I read some of those stories, it answered a different question. A problem that many practitioners have in this part of the world is lack of access to the leader, which means most of the time they're working only with the project team. But as I look through the examples, it allowed me to go back and say again to them, hey, I've spoken about my experiences, but look, this is the way it actually works, that it's not only about leader, it's also about the community of practices, it's also about the end users, it's also about the environment that you create. And there's a lot of value that we can bring in just as a project team, even if we didn't have the firepower. With the firepower, great. Considering the risk status of a particular project, there are projects where you can make the ship with just being the right person for the technical team to use as a sounding board, to guiding the technical team with what could be a clear and present problem that they could address or at least speak of. So yes, I think what you said makes beautiful sense to me.
Yeah, we're partners in the process. And, progress over perfection. Everybody's heard that language, right? Progress over perfection. Go where you're able and make a difference. And you may feel like, oh, I wish I could, or if only I had. But think about what the impact would be if you weren't there. Solutions that fail, people who, get pulled through the change process in an uncomfortable way. So I really ask change practitioners to think, well, I just don't have enough influence, or I'm just not high enough, or I just can't get to the right people. Put the just can'ts aside and think about the I cans. I can make a difference. I can help the project team see the importance of thinking about the people side of the change. I can be their partner to help, as you said, give the feedback that's, the relationship that I can build with the people who are impacted. I had a moment when I was working with the technology firm and leading the change management practice. I worked, so we had some of the smartest, brightest, most capable technology people in the world. I mean, just really doing very complex work. And I walked by a brainstorming session one day where they were doing a deep dive on some really complex technical challenges and trying to figure out a path through. And I heard one of the developers say, now remember, we have to develop for adoption. And I thought, oh my gosh, my words are coming back, right? To introduce, let's develop for adoption. We can put all kinds of technical solutions on board with this particular environment, but if people aren't able to understand what to do and how to do it and to be successful in that, again, we can overcomplicate things. So designing for adoption is a mindset. Making a difference where you can is a mindset, but it's also an opportunity, right? To really think about how to make a difference and to continue to tell the stories of the difference that you've made. And you never know who's going to hear it or how it's going to be repeated. So when you hear yourself and your voice coming through someone else, you know that you're making a difference.
Makes sense. Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much for that. I know I've kept you for a long time and quizzed you as much as I could, and I got tons more questions to ask. But I got one on a lighter note. But it did pop into my head as I was reading it. If you were to choose a Hollywood celebrity or any celebrity to be the voice for your audiobook version of this book, who would you pick? And you can pick maybe even up to 3 and say part 1, part 2, and part 3 are going to be different celebrities. Over to you.
Yeah. I know it's not a possibility, but, the voices that, come to mind, wouldn't it be amazing to hear the book through the voice of Charlton Heston?
Yes.
Or Morgan Freeman, the people that maybe, James Earl Jones, right? That resonance of intentionality and warmth and kindness. But that's not what's going to happen. I have actually, recorded the audiobook, and I'm the voice of the narration for the audiobook. So I didn't have a chance to reach out to a celebrity or a star to do that. But it comes through my voice, and hopefully it shares the enthusiasm I have for this body of work, the excitement I have to actually, hopefully through the book, bring this to more people, to reinforce what they already care about, and to give language and process to this body of work, but also inspire people to go out and make a difference where you can. And it may just be in your own scenario, right? In your own family or your own community, looking at individual change. And maybe you do have an opportunity inside of your organization to influence organizational change, and maybe you have a platform to help inspire that concept of building change capability. So think about what you want, where you are, where you want to go, and how you can pick up this mindset and tool set to be in your pocket and to be there to support you through that process.
Makes sense, Karen. And on behalf of most readers, thank you so much for extending Jeff's legacy. I can now reverently keep that book in the reference section and then make this my well-thumbed desktop version. It's an amazing book. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. Truly a pleasure, truly an honor and a pleasure to be invited into this body of work by the Prosci executive team and to have the opportunity to bring this work forward.
With that, we bring this conversation to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.